So, let me ask you a question. How many of you guys have ever been in a place that was so loud you could hardly even hear yourself talk? Like maybe a concert or camp or something, middle school gathering. Somewhere where like you're standing next to somebody and you basically have to shout in their ear for them to hear a word you're saying, right? I remember one time, the first time I went to a 21 Pilots concert was in 2014, I think, maybe 2015. It's 2014. It was before Blurry Face came out. It was before anybody knew who they were. They were much smaller, and we were in a small little venue of like 500 people, and it was their very first headlining tour. And I remember being in that room with my wife and her family, and we were standing right next to each other, and literally there was somebody like right in front of me, like uncomfortably close, and I was backed into a wall, and when I wanted to say something to Chelsea, I literally had to like pull her by the hair to bring her ear to my mouth and yell at the top of my lungs for her to hear me because it's so loud in the room. And it was one of those things like by the end of the night, I had no voice because I'd been yelling the whole time and been singing along with 21 Pilots. So it was a lot of fun, but like couldn't hear much, right? When there's a lot of voices somewhere, like lots of noise, it's hard to hear anything. Like a lot of people can be saying a lot of stuff and you don't have any idea what anybody is saying because the noise level is just so loud, you can't process any of the noise, right? We've all been in situations like that. It is not a fun place to be. And a lot like everyday life, there's a lot of voices that are speaking out, trying to grab our attention or telling us different things, right? We got our parents, maybe your siblings, your friends, your teachers, your coaches, maybe your small group leaders, maybe me, maybe people you follow on Instagram, the YouTubers you watch. You've got tons of voices, tons of people speaking truth or their truth, and even though I hate that term, speaking something that they're claiming to be truth and wanting you to hear it and receive it and take it as your truth. And there's lots of voices. And so how do you differentiate which ones you should and should not listen to? Anybody ever wrestle with that? Like you're trying to come up with a decision for something or make up your mind, have an opinion about something, and like your teachers are saying one thing, your parents are saying one thing, maybe I'm saying one thing, and maybe you're watching Reels and all or TikToks and all of the different people on there are saying different things about that topic, and so it's like, man, how do you know who to listen to when the noise level is so loud on a particular subject? Or maybe about just anything, right? It's hard nowadays. It's always been difficult, but today it's especially hard to know who to listen to know what voices are good and which ones aren't. And they can all be asking for your attention and for your beliefs. It's tough. And so if we're honest, I'd say that this is pretty difficult for a lot of us. For some of you, maybe you're not on social media yet. Maybe you don't have a smartphone yet. So the voices that you hear is limited to people that you are physically interacting with. Maybe over the summer, those voices drastically decrease because you're not in school. And so maybe there's just a few adults in your life that are speaking, and maybe your friends that you're hanging out with. And so it's a lot less complicated. But for some of you, maybe you got all those things that I just listed. You got all those people saying things. And so it's a little more complex for you. Maybe you're hesitant to listen to some of the adults in your life because you've gotten, you don't believe that they care about you, or you've gotten mixed information from them, or maybe you don't agree with the way that they live their life. And so maybe they're just not nice. And so you got people in your life, maybe adults that you're hesitant to listen to for those reasons. Maybe you struggle listening to adults because you're worried it means that you won't have the ability to make up your own mind and your own opinion about things, and so maybe you struggle to listen then, or maybe you wish you could listen to some wise adults in your life, but it seems like all the adults in your life don't really give you any helpful advice. Maybe for some of you, again, that's no matter what category you fall into that you just can't seem to differentiate what voices are good and which aren't in general, whether that's adults or friends or whatever. And so we've been talking about this idea that you're not too young to have a faith of your own. You're not too young to start taking your faith seriously, to come up with your own opinions and beliefs about things, to start living your life in such a way that it reflects a real and active faith. And so when it comes to like the context of church or faith or following Jesus in your own life journey, what does it look like to listen to the right voices? Because while there's a lot of voices out there, the ones that are the loudest in your ears, the ones that you give the most volume, those ones will help you kind of set the foundation for where everything else falls in line. Like, there's a lot of different people, which means there's a lot of different opinions, and not all of them can be right. Some of them are going to be wrong. Some of them are going to be better than others. But the ones you give the most attention, those are the ones that are going to make the other voices fall in line. So if your parents say something, and let's say you respect your parents a lot because you all are good kids, you respect your parents a lot, right? Like, let's say that your parents say something, and then maybe somebody else says something else. And you're probably going to believe your parents more than what some other random person says because you trust your parents more than other adults probably. And if that's not the case for you, then fill in the blank for who you trust most. You're probably going to go with their opinion over other opinions if they differentiate, if they're different, because you trust that person more. You give that person more volume in your life. And so when it comes to your faith, and when it comes to, even just figuring out what's true and what's not true, what you believe and what actions you're going to take, how you're going to live your life, then you're already doing this, where you're starting to give more attention to the voices you believe and trust than the voices that you don't. And this dynamic is a natural part of life, and it's healthy if done right. And we see lots of examples in Scripture of where it is done right. And Paul and Timothy are one of those examples. Right, we've been talking the last couple of weeks. Paul he wrote most of the New Testament. He writes letters to all the churches that he started and visited, and he's got people that travel with him. One of those is Timothy, and then Timothy gets planted in a town called Ephesus, and so Timothy is this young man who's basically doing his first ministry, and he's leading people older than him, people younger than him, people the same age as him, and he's in a town where a lot of people don't follow Jesus. A lot of people don't believe the same things. And there are lots of different ideas of how we're supposed to live our lives. And so Timothy has all these cards stacked against him, and one of them being, the primary one being his age, right? He's at an age where, a lot of people don't quite respect him yet. And I know that's something that a lot of you in this room can relate to. And so Paul is kind of like a father figure to him. He's an adult in Timothy's life who's older and wiser and gives Timothy advice. And all throughout Paul's letters to Timothy, we have two of them, 1st and 2nd Timothy. Paul is giving advice and instruction to Timothy, and it's kind of like a mentor thing. And Timothy's got the volume of Paul turned way up in his life to give him the insight that he needs. And so let's look at the verse we've been talking about over the last few weeks. We said it all together last week. Let's do it again this week. So let's all read together at the same time. 1, 2, 3. Don't let anyone think less of you because you are young. Be an example to all believers in what you say, in the way you live, in your love, your faith, and your purity. Right? Don't let anyone think less of you because you're young. We've talked about that a lot in the last 2 weeks. If you missed that, I encourage you to go back on YouTube and find that and listen to it, because hopefully that'll be really encouraging for you, help you have the tools you need to live out a live and active faith that does set an example for all the people around you. But this is what Paul has been urging Timothy to do. And he does this in multiple different ways. In fact, all throughout Paul's letters to Timothy, Paul doesn't just talk to him about this kind of stuff. He gives him advice on a lot of different things. In fact, he tells Timothy how to fix stomach problems, right? That's a very practical thing. Back then, they didn't have very clean drinking water, so Paul gives them some help on that. What to do when people are fighting. You ever been around people who are fighting? Is that fun? Yeah. Most of the time, no. And sometimes it's entertaining, right? Most of the time, it's not very fun to be around, especially if it's like in your family or your close friend group. That's not fun. So he gives Timothy advice on how to do that, how to choose good leaders, right? Specific names of people to avoid to spend time with. Your parents ever go like, I don't want you spending time with that person, right? Like, your parents are trying to do this for you a little bit. Paul is doing this for Timothy. Avoid those people, right? How to treat others when leading them. How to use the Bible, right? That's a lot of what we do in church is we teach you from the Bible and how to use the Bible, right? How to handle money, that's a pretty important thing in life, right? What kind of stuff to avoid, what kind of people to hang out with, how to impress older people. How many of you guys wish that you could impress the older people in your life so they gave you some more respect, right? So they didn't think less of you because of your age, right? Paul gives Timothy some direct advice on how to do that. And those are all in these 2 letters of like 6 chapters or less. This is really cool. And so the point being, Timothy had a Paul in his life to give him that advice, to give him that wisdom, to pass down those important things. And you need people like that in your life that can do the same thing, right? This is incredibly difficult in today's day and age because back then, in this time when Paul was writing to Timothy, the culture was a lot different, right? It wasn't as advanced as it is today. You know, we've got a lot of stuff that is great in our culture today, but one of the downsides is like we're separated a lot. Have you guys noticed that? Like you go to school and you're separated by your age and grade. You're in that like for half the day, all week. And then maybe sports, same thing, right? Maybe church. You're around a lot of the same people your age, right? And then high schoolers, same thing. College students, same thing. They're maybe starting to get internships, enter the workforce, and then young adults. And then you got dads and moms and people raising young families. And then you even got grandparents and people older than that. You got retired people. So you got all these ages of people that really in our culture flock together. And so multi-generational relationships are much more hard to come by nowadays. And if you don't have a strong family unit where your grandparents are involved, your parents are involved, and then you're involved, and you all like hang out together on a regular basis, you're not getting a whole lot of multi-generational influence in your lives. Older people don't understand youth culture because they don't have young people in their lives. And young people don't understand what real wisdom is because they don't have a lot of old people in their life speaking that wisdom into their lives. Right? So it's much harder in today's culture, whereas back then, like there were family trades. So like at your age, you would start to learn the family trade. You would be with your dad or your grandparents out in the field and helping with harvest. You'd be learning how to weld, learning how to do the things that help your family make a living. And you'd be doing that with your grandpa and your dad and yourself. And you'd be learning these things together. You'd be learning what it's like to like raise a family and to have make meals and keep the house together. You'd be learning those things almost like on a full-time basis. Kind of like how you're in school today full-time, like 7-8 hours a day. You'd be doing other things, like sometimes longer than that back in the day. And so these multi-generational relationships, it was easy to talk to old people, and for old people, it's easy to talk to young people because you all lived together, shared life together. Today, that's a lot harder. And so this stuff, you got to work for a little bit more. But it's so incredibly important. And people who are successful in life, in their relationships, in achieving their dreams, in their careers, in their school careers, people who are successful have people that are older and wiser than them help them, that walk alongside them, not just tell them what to do, but help them process why they're doing what they're doing and what's a healthier option maybe to consider. Having those people in your life that can mentor you who are older and wiser is so important. And we see this played out in Timothy's life, where Timothy is able to lead the church in Ephesus because Paul took him under his wing, helped him, give him that advice, give him practical living advice, and then Timothy was able to take that and lead by his own example. That's stuff that you are capable of today. And that's what we want for you. The point of today's message is you're not too young to learn from the adults in your life. It's really easy in our culture to hear adults talk and think, oh, they don't know anything about my life. It's been how many years since they've been in middle school, right? Or when they were in middle school, there was no such thing as smartphones. They have no idea what we're dealing with, right? School worked differently when they were they have no idea how I have to prioritize things nowadays, right? You could go on and on about that. And it's easy to like discredit some of the adults in your life because of some of those things, but the reality is adults have a lot of wisdom. Your parents have a lot of wisdom that if we just paid attention to that, then that would greatly influence our lives in a positive way. We'd avoid a lot of mistakes if we just listened to some of the wise counsel of the adults in our lives. And especially the adults in our lives that follow Jesus and have an active faith of their own, they've been around the block a time or two. And they care about you. And so we need a Paul in our lives. We need a few. There's a study done, I think it was about 10 years ago now, of students like yourselves who grew up in church. Did you know that like 80% of students, when they go to college, they walk away from the faith? Like they leave Christianity? That's sad to me. Somebody who like spends my days like pouring into students like you, that's sad. But you know, the study was done, and the students that maintained their faith, the students who kept believing in Jesus in the midst of hard times, who kept believing in Jesus in a world that told them that was ridiculous, you know the ones that kept their faith? They had at least 5 adult influences that actively spoke into their lives on a regular basis. That was the difference between the students that maintained their faith as adults and the ones that fell away. I want you to not only maintain your faith, but to grow in it, to thrive in it, to have a foundation that is so secure by the time you leave high school that that's not even a concern for you because you've asked the hard questions. You've dug deep. You've gone through some storms. You've prepared for some storms when they get here. And those aren't issues for you when you go out on your own. And when you do go out on your own, you have relationships with adults back home that you're able to fall back on and call and have conversations with and help process things that you're experiencing. I want that for each and every one of you. It will make all aspects of life way easier. So you can choose who gets to speak loudly into your life in the midst of thousands of voices trying to compete for your attention. So as you get ready to go into your small groups, there's a couple things that I want you to do. One, I want you to decide what's one thing that you could use some advice for in your life, right? Maybe it's something you want to celebrate. Maybe it's something that, like it's something going on in your friend group and you don't know how to deal with the dynamics and the relationships. Maybe it's something going on in your home. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's trying to figure out your classes that you need to be taking or be looking towards for what you want to do to achieve your dreams. Whatever it is. Maybe it's understanding something about the Bible that the church seems to say, but everybody else seems to say something different. What is one thing like that? And then secondly, decide who. Who are 3 to 5 adults that you can think of that you know you could go to ask a question about that thing? Who is a God-fearing adult in your life who can speak truth into that what? Think about that. And then third thing is kind of the hardest step because of some of the difficulties in multi-generational relationships today, but ask them. Text them. Say, hey, random question, I know this is out of the blue, but how do I deal with this situation? Or can we talk about this? Right? How many of you talking on the phone terrifies you? That's weird. I'd rather just text, right? If talking on the phone is weird for you, practice it. It's a life skill that'll actually do you really well, especially when it comes to like looking for jobs and stuff later. Like being able to talk on the phone is a really important life skill. But then also arranging like a meetup with somebody, like an adult that you trust. Hey, can we go grab some ice cream or grab a Coke and just talk about this? Right. Adults love to be able to help younger people because they either had an adult in their life that helped influence their lives in a good way and they want to do the same for people like you, or they didn't and they want you to. So ask an adult. Be like, hey, can I ask you a question, like free of judgment? And then just dive in, right? It doesn't have to be a big deal. And the more you do it, the easier it'll be. That's something I would like to challenge you guys with moving forward. And so as you go into your small groups, what's one thing in your life that you want a wise adult to speak into? What's an area of your life that you would benefit from having an adult speak into? Right? Think about that question And then I'm going to pray you guys will go to your small groups and talk this out. Maybe if you don't know an adult that could speak into your life in anything, start with your small group leader, because let me tell you something. They're here because they care about you. They shared last week a lot of like why they like to work with middle schoolers. They're here because they care about you. They're here because they love you guys. They're here because they see your potential and they want to see your faith grow. So start with them, even if you don't know them very well. Maybe you know them really well because you come for a few years, but you've never really been a part of the conversation. I encourage you to take that step. Take this seriously. Ask them those questions. If you don't have anybody else in your life, this is a great, safe place to start.